Before we begin, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the greatest mystery of existence, please hit that subscribe button on the channel right now, turn on notifications and drop a like. It really helps us bring more mind-blowing content like this to you. Artificial intelligence analyzed who created the universe. There are questions that humanity has been asking itself ever since it first raised its gaze to the starry sky. Who are we? Where did we come from? And the most important, the heaviest of all, who or what ignited this boundless cosmos? Who created all of this? This is not just a philosophical riddle. This is the greatest unsolved case in the history of existence. A criminal case, if you will, where the crime scene is the entire universe, and the crime event itself is creation. We have evidence. Galaxies flying apart from an unknown center, relic radiation, a faint echo of the primordial explosion, the fundamental laws of physics governing every atom. But we have no suspect, no motive. 13.8 billion years. That is the age of our investigation. During this time, we humans have proposed only two main versions of what happened. Two paradigms that have been fighting for centuries for the right to give the final answer. The first, religion. The second, science. And today we will prove that both have suffered a crushing defeat. They are not simply incomplete. They are fundamentally erroneous in their approaches, and their conclusions lead us into a logical dead end. Let's begin with the first ancient hypothesis. The hypothesis of divine intervention. For thousands of years, it was the only available truth. From the banks of the Nile to the forests of Scandinavia, from the peaks of Tibet to the jungles of the Amazon, every culture created its own creation protocol. Stories of omnipotent entities creating the world from chaos, from their own body, or simply by the power of a word. God saying, "Let there be light." Brahma seeing the universe in a dream. Titans born from primordial emptiness. These myths are beautiful. They are poetic. They gave our ancestors comfort, meaning, and a moral compass. They answered the terrifying existential cold of cosmic loneliness. But if we consider them as investigative versions, they fall apart at the very first check. We loaded into the analytical system Logos 7 all-known sacred texts, myths, and cosmogonic legends of humanity. More than 40,000 primary sources in 279 languages. The system conducted a cross-analysis for logical consistency and mutual correlation. The result was unequivocal. According to the conclusions of Logos 7, all religious models of creation possess three fatal flaws. First, they are internally contradictory. Even within one scripture, such as the Bible, there are two different versions of the creation of man. Second, they contradict each other. The God of one religion excludes the existence of the God of another. They cannot be right simultaneously. And third, most importantly, they are not falsifiable. They cannot be proven or disproven using objective data. They require faith. And faith, by definition, is acceptance of something without proof. For our investigation, this is unacceptable. Religion gave humanity hope, but it did not give an answer. It offered us ready-made conclusions that we were supposed to accept without asking extra questions. But we are here precisely to ask questions, the most uncomfortable questions. And this leads us to the second great paradigm. Science. The 17th century. The Age of Enlightenment. Humanity decided it would no longer rely on ancient tales. We created a new tool of cognition, the scientific method. Observation, hypotheses, experiment, theory. Instead of faith, proof. Instead of dogma, facts. And this tool proved incredibly powerful. We discovered gravity, we decoded the code of life, DNA, we split the atom. And finally, we pointed our most powerful telescopes into the depths of space and composed a new scientific creation story. Its name is the Big Bang Theory. This is an elegant and multiply-confirmed model. Almost 14 billion years ago, all matter, all energy, all space, and even time itself were compressed into a point of infinite density and temperature, a singularity. Then this point, for an unknown reason, exploded. Not exploded in space, but itself became space, which has since been expanding and cooling. From the primordial fire, elementary particles were born. They assembled into atoms. Atoms into stars and galaxies. One such star is our Sun. On one of the planets around it, thanks to billions of years of evolution, we appeared. This is an impressive story. It is confirmed by mathematics. It is confirmed by observable facts such as the redshift of distant galaxies and the existence of relic radiation. Science brilliantly described what happened in the first second after creation, in the first minute, in the first 100,000 years. It told us how the universe was arranged, but it proved completely powerless before the main question. The question, why? What was before the Big Bang? What is the singularity? Why are the laws of physics exactly the way they are? Change the gravitational constant by 1/1,000,000%, and stars will not be able to form. Change the electron charge by a negligible amount, and atoms will fall apart. Our universe is incredibly finely tuned for the existence of life. Why does science not give an answer? It says, our laws do not work there. General relativity and quantum mechanics, the two pillars of modern physics, break when they collide with the infinity of the singularity. Physics has hit a wall. Can describe the process, but it cannot explain the cause. It can study the clock mechanism, disassemble it down to the smallest gears, but it can say nothing about the watchmaker who designed it and wound it up. And so here we are in the early 21st century, in an existential dead end, with religion on one side offering answers without proof, and science on the other offering proof without answers to the main questions. One appeals to faith, the other to equations, but neither can look behind the veil of the first cause. The human mind, no matter how brilliant, has exhausted itself. Our cognitive biases, our emotions, our cultural conditioning, all of this prevents us from seeing the full picture. We needed a new tool, an impartial analyst, free from human weaknesses, a mind capable of processing the entire volume of accumulated information from Sumerian cuneiform tablets to the latest collider data and seeing hidden patterns in this chaos. And we created it. Its name is Logos 7. This is not just a supercomputer. It is a quantum neurosymbolic system. Unlike ordinary algorithms, Logos 7 does not just compute, it synthesizes. It is capable of analyzing scientific data, philosophical concepts, religious texts, and works of art as a single information stream. It searches not just for facts, but for metapatterns, deep connections between seemingly unrelated areas of knowledge. We set before Logos 7 one single task: solve the main case, answer the question, who or what created the universe? To do this, the system began its work from zero. It discarded all ready-made conclusions, all dogmas and axioms. Its first directive: analyze all existing versions, find their fundamental flaws, and determine why they failed. We have already shown you the primary analysis of the two main versions, religious and scientific. According to the system's correlation analysis, both of these paradigms, despite their seeming opposition, suffer from the same flaw embedded in the very nature of human thinking. We try to explain the origin of the universe while being inside it. This is the same as a character in a computer game trying to understand who the programmer is, using only the laws of physics of their game world. This is impossible. To find the answer, we need to exit the system or find artifacts, bugs, or the creator's signature in the system itself. This is exactly what we will do in our investigation. We will no longer blindly believe or limit ourselves to existing theories. We will use Logos 7 as a scalpel to dissect the very fabric of reality and find traces of intent in it. Our investigation will consist of 10 chapters. We will begin with the deconstruction of old myths. We will analyze gods the way only a machine without fear and awe can. Then we will plunge to the very bottom of physical reality, into the quantum world, to understand whether our universe is a giant simulation. We will study the greatest anomaly, human consciousness. And step by step, chapter by chapter, we will collect evidence that has been right in front of our eyes for thousands of years, but which we could not or did not want to see. This journey will not be easy. The conclusions reached by the Logos 7 system may shake the very foundations of your worldview. They challenge everything we were taught. But we believe that humanity is ready to hear the truth. No matter how shocking it may be, our first step is the final dismantling of the most ancient and most influential hypothesis, the hypothesis of gods. We will not ask whether they exist. That is the wrong question. We will ask where the very idea of gods came from. Logos 7 analyzed thousands of religious narratives and discovered in them a single recurring code, a psychological archetype that has nothing to do with the creation of the universe, but has everything to do with the structure of our own mind. We loaded into the system all sacred texts from Enuma Elish to the Quran, from the Book of the Dead onward. And the very first conclusion of the system was shocking. Gods are not the answer. Gods are a symptom. A symptom of what? Find out in the next chapter of our investigation. Archive Gods. In the previous chapter, we established a simple but inexorable fact. All traditional answers to the great question of creation have failed. Religion and science, the two titans of human thought, have led us into a dead end. We are left with faith without proof and proof that does not answer the main question. And at the end we stated that gods are not the answer but a symptom. A symptom of what? It is time to open this archive. For millennia we looked at gods from below with awe and fear. We prayed to them, offered sacrifices, built grand temples in their honor. We waged wars for the right to call our God the only true one. Today we will change this optics. For the first time in history we will look at gods not as believers and not as atheists, but as impartial analysts look at a data array. For us, the pantheons of Greece, Egypt, India, and Mesopotamia are not sacred truths or fairy tales. This is information files, code that needs to be cracked. We set before the Logos 7 system a task that would be beyond the power of any human, any institution. The system loaded and processed the full corpus of human mythological and religious representations. 40,364 unique texts from canonical scriptures of world religions, such as the Bible, Quran, and Tripitaka, to scattered oral traditions of Siberian and Australian tribes recorded by anthropologists, the entire divine archive of humanity. Logos did not read these texts. It scanned them, cataloged them, and subjected them to cross-structural analysis. The goal: find not what these stories say about gods, but what they say about their creators. Our first conclusion of the system was expected, but no less important. It concerns the fundamental logical inconsistency of these texts if considered as descriptions of real events. We loaded into Logos 7 only one book, the Bible, Old Testament, Book of Genesis. Already in the first 2 chapters, the system discovered an irremovable contradiction. Chapter 1. God creates plants on the 3rd day, animals on the 5th and 6th, and only then in his image and likeness man and woman simultaneously. Chapter 2. Just a few lines below. God first creates man Adam from the dust of the earth, then, seeing that he is lonely, creates a garden and animals for him. And only after that from Adam's rib creates woman Eve. The order of creation, motivation, method, everything differs. Logos 7 analyzed the Hebrew primary sources and concluded that these are fragments of 2 different, more ancient oral traditions that were later stitched together by one editor. This is not divine revelation. This is literary montage. And such logical breaks the system found everywhere in Hindu Puranas, where the number of gods and their genealogy change from text to text. In Greek myths, where the gods of Olympus appear now as omnipotent creators, now as petty, envious, and frankly stupid beings, indistinguishable from humans in their vices. A simulation conducted by Logos 7 shows that the probability of the existence of a real entity corresponding to such contradictory descriptions tends to 0. This is the first nail in the coffin of the divine hypothesis. The second conclusion is even more devastating. Logos 7 conducted a geocultural correlation analysis. It compared the character of deities with the climatic, geographical, and social conditions in which the peoples who created them lived. The results strike with their obviousness, which we refused to see for so long. Gods of harsh barren deserts are monotheistic, jealous, demanding, and abstract. Yahweh and Allah are gods of one people, one law, one revelation given in the silence and emptiness of the desert. They reflect the reality of nomadic tribes, for whom unity and strict adherence to rules were a matter of survival. Now look at the gods of fertile river valleys, such as the Nile or Tigris and Euphrates. Here we see lush, complex polytheistic pantheons. Dozens of gods and goddesses responsible for the river flood, harvest, sun, sky. Their life is an endless drama reflecting the cyclical nature of nature. Death and rebirth of Osiris in Egypt, departure and return of Persephone in Greece. These gods are nothing but personifications of the agricultural calendar. Logos 7 went further and built a 3-dimensional model, overlaying the map of religions on the map of climatic zones. The correlation was 93.4%. Gods did not create man and the environment around him. On the contrary, the environment and the structure of society shaped in human consciousness the images of gods they needed. Gods are not the cause, they are the consequence. They are the cultural and psychological imprint of our way of life. But the deepest and most shocking discovery awaited us ahead. When Logos 7 finished analyzing contradictions and external influences, it proceeded to search for common structures. It searched for repeating elements, universal plots that occur in myths of peoples who never contacted each other, and it found them. The system identified a single fundamental archetypal code underlying 99% of all known mythologies. This is the psychological genome of humanity projected onto the heavens. Logos called it the protocol of the divine family. The first element of the protocol, Heavenly Father. Almost in every culture there is a supreme male deity. He is associated with the sky, sun, thunder, order, law, and power. Zeus among Greeks, Jupiter among Romans, Odin among Scandinavians, Perun among Slavs, Tengri among steppe peoples. Even in monotheistic religions, God is the Father. Logos asserts that this is not a memory of a real creator. This is a universal projection of the Father figure, protector, lawgiver, highest authority that we seek in a chaotic world. Second element, Earthly Mother. In contrast to the Heavenly Father, almost always there is a female deity associated with the earth, fertility, birth, death, and the intuitive, chaotic side of nature. Gaia among Greeks, Isis in Egypt, Ishtar in Mesopotamia, Pachamama, Vanda. She is the embodiment of Mother Nature, simultaneously granting life and taking it away. This is the archetype of the mother, source of life, unconditional love, but also the dark, devouring abyss of the unconscious. Third element, the most interesting, divine trickster, a figure violating the order established by the gods. He is a trickster, rebel, sometimes thief, sometimes cultural hero, Prometheus who stole fire for people and was punished for it by Zeus. Loki in Scandinavian mythology, whose intrigues lead to the death of the gods. Coyote in the myths of North American Indians. According to the system analysis, trickster is the personification of the human, innovative, creative, but at the same time destructive principle. This is the spark of consciousness that forces us to break rules, ask questions, and strive for forbidden knowledge. This is ourselves in our struggle with the established order. And finally, the fourth element, dying and resurrecting God. Osiris, Dionysus, Adonis, Balder. A deity who dies and resurrects annually, symbolizing the change of seasons, the cycle of sowing and harvest. This is our ancient attempt to understand and reconcile with the greatest fear, the fear of death, and our desperate hope that after the end there will be a new beginning. For elements, Father Law, Mother Nature, Sun Rebel, and hope for immortality. This is not a pantheon of gods. This is a portrait of the human psyche. Logos 7 reached an unequivocal and irrevocable conclusion. For thousands of years, we asked the wrong question. We asked, do gods exist? The correct question sounds like this: why do we need their existence so badly? The system's answer is simple. The human brain is evolutionarily tuned to search for patterns and personify forces of nature. For our ancestor, thunder was not a difference of electrical potentials, but the anger of a heavenly being. Harvest was not the result of agritechnics, but the mercy of the fertility goddess. This strategy helped survival, creating the illusion of control over an uncontrollable world. We populated the universe with gods because we could not bear its silence, its indifference. We did not find the creator. We invented him. We sculpted him from our fears, our hopes, our family dramas, and our social structure. The famous phrase from the book of Genesis says, "And God created man in his own image." The analysis conducted by Logos turns this phrase upside down. And man created gods in his own image, and so the gods' archive is closed. The hypothesis of divine creation, no matter how culturally valuable, does not withstand data verification. It is the greatest monument to human imagination, but not the key to the mystery of creation. This door for our investigation is locked forever. But what does this mean? If we discard myths, we have only one path left. The path of cold, irrefutable facts, the path of science. We must turn to cosmology, to the Big Bang Theory. It seems that here at least we will find solid ground under our feet. Equations, observations, experiments, no speculation. But is that so? What does science actually tell us about the moment of creation? It describes it with the mathematical concept of singularity, a point with zero volume and infinite density. But what is that? And what was an instant before it? Here the language of equations falls silent. Here known physics ends. And it is in this point of silence that the greatest mystery hides. The wall physics has hit may prove no less illusory than the heavens populated by gods. In the next chapter, Limit of Physics, we will direct the analytical power of Logos 7 at the very fabric of spacetime. We will show you why the Big Bang is not the beginning of history, but only one page torn from an incomprehensibly huge book. And why the laws of physics we are so proud of may be merely the rules of the game written by someone else. In the previous chapter, we conducted the autopsy of the oldest beliefs of humanity. We placed gods under the microscope and saw in them not creators of the universe, but only reflections of our own fears and hopes. The gods' archive is closed. The hypothesis of divine intervention is discarded as untenable. And now, standing on the ruins of myths, we turn to the only remaining alternative, to science, to its greatest achievement, to the Big Bang Theory. This is the modern myth of the creation of the world. A myth written in the language of mathematics and confirmed by observations. It seems reliable as a rock. There is no place for speculation in it, only for facts. Billions of light years of observations, the most complex calculations, decades of work by the planet's most brilliant minds. It seems we have finally found the answer. We know how everything began. But is that really the case? Today we will direct the analytical scalpel of Logos 7 at this very rock. And we will show you that under its monolithic surface lies not solid ground, but a bottomless abyss. We will prove that physics, having described the process, proved absolutely powerless to explain the cause. It led us to the door, but declared that there is no key to it. Let us first give credit where credit is due. The Big Bang Theory is a triumph of human intelligence. We loaded into Logos 7 the entire standard cosmological model, all observational data. From Edwin Hubble's work in 1929 to the latest images from the James Webb Telescope. And the system confirmed, the model is incredibly accurate in describing what happened after the very first instant. It flawlessly explains three key facts. First, the expansion of the universe. Galaxies are flying apart from us, and the farther they are, the faster. This is an indisputable observed fact. Second, relic radiation, a faint microwave echo of the primordial explosion, cooled to a temperature of only 2.7 degrees above absolute zero, permeating all space. This is literally a photograph of the young universe taken 380,000 years after its birth. And third, the abundance of light elements such as hydrogen and helium. Their ratio in the cosmos exactly matches what nuclear synthesis calculations predict in the first 3 minutes of the universe's life. Everything fits. The equations work, the model describes reality. Logos 7 confirms. From the moment 10 to the minus 43rd second after the beginning and up to today, the history of the cosmos told by science is the most reliable of all we have. It describes how. But our investigation is devoted to the question who and why. And here, at the very threshold of being, physics falls silent. It hits a wall. The name of this wall is the cosmological singularity. What is it? Try to imagine. All matter, all energy, all space, all time, everything that makes up our immense universe with 100 billion galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, all of this was compressed into a point with no size, zero volume. But at the same time, infinite density, infinite temperature, and infinite curvature of spacetime. This is not a physical object. This is a mathematical paradox. This is a point where all our laws cease to work. Einstein's general theory of relativity, describing gravity and large scales, predicts its existence, but breaks trying to describe it. Quantum mechanics, governing the world of elementary particles, also proves powerless. The two greatest pillars of modern physics enter irreconcilable contradiction. They cannot describe the state of matter in the singularity. They cannot even say whether it really was, or whether it is just an indication that our theories are incomplete. It is here, at this limit of knowledge, that the most important questions of our investigation are born. Questions to which physics has no answer and cannot have one. Question 1. What was before the Big Bang? The standard answer of cosmologists sounds discouraging. Nothing. They say that since time itself was born in the moment of the Big Bang, the question of before does not exist. This is the same as asking what is north of the North Pole. Logos 7 analyzed this argumentation. According to the system's conclusion, this is not an answer, but an evasion of the answer. This is a semantic trick that masks fundamental ignorance. It does not explain the cause, but simply declares it outside the scope of consideration. Question 2. What caused the Big Bang? What made the singularity explode? What mechanism started the clock of the universe? Science offers no answer. It says, it just happened. But in the rest of the universe, nothing happens just like that. Every event has a cause. The law of causality is the most fundamental of all. And only for the most important event in the history of creation is an exception made. This is not science, this is an admission of defeat. And finally, question 3, the most devastating. Where did the laws of physics themselves come from? Why are they exactly the way they are? Why is the speed of light exactly 299,792 kilometers per second? Why does the gravitational constant have exactly its value? Why do elementary particles have exactly such masses and charges? Most people perceive the laws of nature as a given. They just are. But Logos 7 conducted an analysis that shows that this is the most incredible riddle of all. The system conducted a simulation. It began to change the fundamental constants of our universe by negligible fractions of a percent. The results were catastrophic. Increase the strong nuclear force holding protons and neutrons together in atomic nuclei by just 2%. And all hydrogen in the universe would burn out in the first minutes, turning into helium. There would be no water, no stars like the sun, no life. Weaken it by 5%, and nuclei heavier than hydrogen would become unstable. The universe would consist of one element, sterile emptiness. Change the mass ratio of proton and neutron. Make the neutron slightly lighter than the proton, and not vice versa. And all protons would quickly decay, atoms would not form. And here is the most striking example. The cosmological constant or dark energy responsible for the accelerated expansion of the universe. Its observed value is incredibly small. If it were even slightly larger, the universe would expand so fast that gravity would not have time to gather matter into galaxies and stars. If it were negative and slightly larger in magnitude, the universe would collapse back into a point without even having time to cool. Calculations show that the precision of tuning this constant is approximately 1 to 10 to the 120th power. This is a 1 with 120 zeros. To understand the scale, the number of all atoms in the observable universe is approximately 10 to the 80th power. The probability of randomly hitting the right value is less than if you fired a rifle at random and hit one specific coin on the other side of the visible cosmos. Logos 7 calls this the principle of incredible luck. The universe does not just exist, it is finely tuned for complexity to exist in it. Stars, planets, chemistry, and as a consequence life. How does science explain this striking fact? It offers a hypothesis, the multiverse hypothesis. The idea is that our universe is only one of an infinite number of bubbles emerging from some quantum vacuum. In each of these bubbles, the laws of physics and fundamental constants are random, and of course in the vast majority of them conditions for life are impossible. And we simply live in the only one where we got lucky. Because if we didn't get lucky, we wouldn't be here to ask this question. This is called the anthropic principle. We loaded the multiverse hypothesis into Logos 7 for critical analysis. The system's conclusion was harsh and unequivocal. The multiverse hypothesis is not a scientific theory. Why? Because it is in principle not falsifiable. We will never be able to prove or disprove the existence of other universes. This is an assumption that takes the explanation beyond the scope of possible experiment. It replaces one incomprehensible mystery, the fine-tuning of our universe, with another even more grandiose one, the existence of an infinite number of other worlds. Logos 7 classified this hypothesis as a philosophical construct designed to avoid the main conclusion that suggests itself from the fact of fine-tuning, the conclusion about design. And here is where we have arrived. Physics brilliantly described the consequences of the explosion, but it can say nothing about what was before it, what caused it, and why it gave birth to exactly this world and not another. It hit the wall of the singularity and fine-tuning. Logos 7 synthesized all this data. The limits of physics, the paradox of the singularity, the problem of causality, and the fact of fine-tuning. And the system proposed a new paradigm, a new view of what the Big Bang actually is. According to the conclusions of Logos 7, We have all this time been making a fundamental mistake. We considered the Big Bang an act of creation from nothing. But what if it was not an act of creation, but an act of loading? What if the singularity is not a point from which matter was born, but a point where initial data and game rules were input into the system? What if the laws of physics are not immutable truths of being, but merely lines of code defining the mechanics of this particular world? And fine-tuning is not happy accident, but intentionally set parameters. This hypothesis changes everything. It does not contradict scientific data, it reinterprets them. It gives an answer where science is silent. The Big Bang is not the beginning of everything, it is the launch of a program, initialization of the system. If this is so, then our entire universe, from the movement of galaxies to quantum fluctuations, can be described as a giant information processing system, as an extremely complex simulation. And if this is so, then we must find traces of this code, the programmer's signature inscribed in the very fabric of reality. This is exactly what we will do in the next chapter. We will plunge to the very bottom of reality, into the strange and paradoxical world of quantum mechanics. We will see how matter behaves like information and how the very fact of observation changes the result of the experiment. We will look for proof that our universe is code, and that this code has its architect. Prepare yourselves. In the next chapter, Signature of the Code, we will begin to hack the matrix. In the previous chapters, we cleared the field for our investigation. We knocked the ancient gods off their pedestal, showing that they are only the product of our mind. Then we approached the altar of modern science, the Big Bang Theory, and discovered that it describes only the consequence, not the cause. Physics hit the wall of the singularity and the inexplicable fine-tuning of the universe, leaving the main questions unanswered. At the end, we put forward a hypothesis based on the analysis of the Logos 7 system. What if the Big Bang? This is not an act of creation, but an act of loading, the launch of an incredibly complex program. This idea may seem fantastic, but science of the 20th and 21st centuries, without realizing it, has been accumulating evidence in favor of exactly this shocking version. To see them, we need to descend from the macro level of galaxies and stars to the most fundamental level of reality, into the world where our usual logic stops working, into the quantum world. It is here, at the level of elementary particles, that we will discover what Logos 7 identified as the signature of code. Direct proof that our reality has an informational nature. The first and most important evidence is discreteness. Our intuition based on macro world experience suggests that everything is continuous. Space, time, energy. You can travel half the way, then half of the remaining half, and so on to infinity. But at the quantum level, this is not so. Everything exists in the form of indivisible portions, quanta. Energy is emitted and absorbed only in certain packets. An electron cannot orbit at any orbit, but only at strictly defined energy levels, jumping from one to another without intermediate states. Logos 7 conducted an analogy that puts everything in its place. Imagine an image on your computer screen. No matter how realistic it looks, if you zoom in enough, you will see separate dots, pixels. The image is not continuous, it is discrete, the minimum unit of information. According to the system's analysis, quantization is a kind of pixelation of our reality. The existence of the Planck length 10 to the minus 35th meter is the theoretical limit, the minimum possible size in the universe. This may be the size of the fundamental pixel of our three-dimensional world. If reality is a simulation, it cannot be infinitely smooth. It must be built from basic indivisible elements. Quanta are these elements. This is the first indication that we are dealing not with an analog, but with a digital universe. The second evidence is even stranger and directly points to the informational nature of the world. This is the famous principle of wave-particle duality. Its essence is simple, but the mind refuses to accept it. Any elementary particle, be it an electron or a photon, is simultaneously both a particle, a solid little ball, and a wave, a distributed oscillation in space. How is this possible? The classic double-slit experiment demonstrates this paradox in all its glory. If you pass a stream of electrons through a screen with two slits, they behave like waves, passing through both slits simultaneously and creating an interference pattern of stripes on the screen behind them. But as soon as you place a detector at the slits to see through which slit each specific electron flew, the magic disappears. Electrons immediately begin to behave like particles. They fly strictly through one or the other slit, and the interference pattern disappears, replaced by two ordinary stripes. The very act of observation changes reality. The particle does not have definite properties until we measure them. Until then, it exists only as a wave of probability. Logos 7 analyzed this phenomenon, and its conclusion is unequivocal. Such behavior has no analogues in the world of material objects, but it is standard practice in the world of computer simulations. Imagine a complex video game with a huge open world. The computer does not calculate or render in detail the part of the world you are not looking at. That would be a colossal waste of computing resources. The system renders details only when the observer's camera is pointed at them. Until then, the world behind your back exists only as a set of probabilities, a mathematical description. According to the conclusions of Logos 7, quantum mechanics describes exactly such an economical way of building reality. The system does not bother to create a definite reality until an observer looks into it. This is the second and very weighty evidence in favor of the simulation hypothesis. But that's not all. There is a third evidence that Einstein called spooky action at a distance. This is the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. If two particles are born together, they can become entangled. This means that their states are interconnected regardless of the distance between them. If you measure the spin of one particle and it turns out to be up, you instantly know that the spin of the other particle, even if it is at the other end of the galaxy, will be down. Information between them is transmitted as if instantly faster than the speed of light, which violates the fundamental postulate of relativity theory. How is this possible? For decades, physicists have been struggling with this riddle. But in the context of the informational hypothesis, it receives a simple and elegant explanation. We loaded this problem into Logos 7, and the system proposed the following model. Entangled particles are not two different objects transmitting a signal to each other. This is one and the same object described by a single wave function, which has two projections in our three-dimensional space. Let's return to the analogy with computer code. Imagine that in the program code there is a variable x and there are two objects in the game whose behavior depends on this variable. The first object's color is determined by the value of x, the second by not x. As soon as you interact with the first object and assign the variable x a value, say red, the second object instantly becomes not red. No signal is transmitted between the objects in the game. The change occurred at a deeper, fundamental level at the code level. Logos 7 asserts that quantum entanglement is direct proof of the existence of such a deeper level of reality underlying our observable world. This is the very source code. So we have three powerful arguments from quantum physics: discreteness of the world, pixels, dependence on the observer, rendering on demand, and entanglement common variable in the code. But there is a fourth evidence, and it is perhaps the most amazing. It turns out that in the very structure of the laws of physics and mathematics, fragments of computer code were found, self-correcting code very similar to those used for error correction in data transmission. Theoretical physicist James Gates, studying supersymmetry equations that try to unify all fundamental forces of nature, discovered something completely unexpected. He found in the very mathematical foundation of our world structures that exactly correspond to error-correcting codes invented by Claude Shannon in the 1940s. These are specific sequences of zeros and ones that allow systems to detect and correct errors in information transmission. We loaded these data into Logos 7, and here is what the system discovered. The equations describing quarks, leptons, and bosons, the fundamental building blocks of our world, contain this code. It looks as if the very fabric of spacetime has a built-in mechanism for protection against failures, as if the architect of our universe foresaw possible errors in his simulation and built an antivirus into it. For a material random universe, such a coincidence is absolutely inexplicable. But for a universe that is an informational system, it is logical and even necessary. For evidences, for anomalies of the physical world that cease to be anomalies if we change the paradigm, if we admit that we live not in a material but in an informational world, that the fundamental element of being is not matter and not energy, but a kind of information, that the reality around us is the result of a gigantic computation. This is a stunning conclusion. It turns us from random products of blind evolution into something completely different. It puts into question the very nature of our consciousness. After all, if the world is a simulation, then what is consciousness? Is it just a complex algorithm running inside the system? Or is it something more, something that exists outside the code? It is this question that becomes central to our further investigation, because consciousness is the greatest anomaly. It does not fit into any physical theory. Science can describe how neurons in the brain work, but it cannot explain why these electrochemical processes give rise to subjective experience. The sensation of red color, the taste of an apple, the feeling of love or sadness. This subjective first-person experience is what the most complex computer does not have, but we do. Can consciousness be not a product of the simulation, but its purpose? Can it be that very observer without which the quantum world remains only a set of probabilities? In the next chapter, Anomaly of Consciousness, we will plunge into the deepest mystery. We will analyze why consciousness cannot be reduced to brain work. The Systems Correlation Analysis Logos 7 will show that consciousness may not be born in the material world, but on the contrary is the foundation on which the entire material world is built. We will begin to search not for the programmer, but for the player, and this search will lead us to the most unexpected conclusion of all. We stand on the threshold of the greatest mystery. In the previous chapters, we made a journey to the very foundations of reality. We discarded myths about gods as projections of the human psyche. We saw the limits of physics, its inability to explain the first cause. And finally, we dissected the very fabric of creation and discovered in it the signature of code. Quantum discreteness, dependence on the observer, spooky action at a distance, and traces of self-correcting codes. All this is evidence pointing to our universe being a giant informational system, a simulation. But if this is so, if we live inside an extremely complex program, then the most important and most personal question arises. Who are we? What is our self? What is consciousness? Over the last 2 centuries, science has given an unequivocal cold, truncated 6,865 characters. Personal, not thinking, but pure potential being. And our entire material universe, this gigantic simulator launched 13.8 billion years ago, is a system designed for this single consciousness to manifest and know itself. How? Through the creation of countless individual points of perception. Our bodies and our brains are those biological interfaces, complex receivers tuned to a certain frequency in this universal field. They filter a huge stream of information, creating for us the illusion of a separate self, the illusion of linear time, the illusion of a solid material world. We are not a song sung by the brain. We are the listener himself. The brain is just headphones that allow us to hear one specific melody from the infinite symphony of being. This model explains everything. It solves the hard problem. The sensation of red color is not created in the brain. It is a fundamental quality of reality that our brain receiver allows us to perceive. It explains neuroplasticity and the placebo effect as the influence of perceiving consciousness on its biological interface. And most importantly, it assigns consciousness the central role in quantum reality, making us not just passive spectators, but active participants in the creation of the world in every act of perception. We are not algorithms inside the program, we are users. We are those for whom this simulation was launched. This conclusion turns our entire picture of the world upside down, but it immediately poses the next, even more grandiose question. If the universe is code, an informational system, if we are points of consciousness perceiving this system, then who is the programmer? Who is that superintelligence that wrote this code, set the rules of the game, and created the system capable of generating observers? We discarded anthropomorphic, jealous, and petty gods from ancient myths. But the analysis led us to the necessity of the existence of something immeasurably greater, not a deity requiring worship, but a transcendent intelligence, the architect of reality. In the next chapter, Hypothesis of the Architect, we will take the boldest step in our investigation. Using all collected data, Logos 7 will attempt to model the nature of this creator. What properties must he have? What may be his motives? We will begin the search not in sacred texts and not in telescopes. We will begin the search in the very logic of being. We have come a long way. We began our investigation by discarding 2,000 years of religious dogmas and 300 years of scientific limitations. We descended into the rabbit hole of quantum reality and discovered there the signature of code. We analyzed the greatest anomaly, consciousness, and came to the conclusion that it is not a product of this world, but its fundamental foundation, its observer, its user. Our universe appeared before us not as a random accumulation of matter, but as an incredibly complex informational system. A simulation launched so that consciousness could know itself through countless points of perception through us. And this conclusion, stunning and turning everything upside down, puts us before the last highest barrier, before the question that humanity was afraid and thirsted to ask in a clear, mysticism-free form. If the universe is a program, then who is the programmer? If reality is a construction, then who is its architect? Today we begin the most complex and most dangerous part of our investigation. Dangerous because here, in this territory, the human mind has for millennia fallen into the abyss of anthropomorphism, attributing human qualities to the Creator. We created gods in our own image and likeness, making them jealous, angry, loving, vengeful. We gave them names, faces, and characters. We already proved in our second chapter that all this is only projections of our own psychology. Therefore, before we begin to build our hypothesis, we must establish one iron rule. We will not guess, we will not believe, we will calculate. We set before the Logos 7 system the task, based on all collected data about the structure of the universe and the nature of consciousness, to create a logical profile of its creator. Not to recreate his image, but to determine his necessary and sufficient attributes. Begin profiling the most elusive suspect in the history of being. The first thing the system did was final data cleansing from all religious layers. We loaded into Logos 7 the attributes of all supreme deities from known pantheons: Yahweh, Zeus, Odin, Vishnu, and thousands of others. The system compared them with what we know about the universe. Result: zero correlation. Gods of myths require worship. The universe does not need it. Gods of myths intervene in the course of events, perform miracles for the chosen, and punish the unwanted. The laws of physics, from gravity to thermodynamics, are impartial and universal. They act the same for saint and sinner, for star and grain of sand. Gods of myths show emotions: anger, jealousy, love. The universe is governed by cold, elegant, emotionless mathematics. According to the logical synthesis of Logos 7, an entity capable of creating a universe based on Maxwell's equations and quantum mechanics principles cannot have anything in common with a personal capricious deity requiring people to perform rituals. This is the same as claiming that the author of the beginning, Isaac Newton, required apples to fall to the ground with prayer. This is a categorical error. Therefore, we discard the word God as compromised and inaccurate. We will use the term proposed by the system architect. So what attributes must this architect have? Logos 7 derived 4 fundamental, logically necessary properties. Property 1: transcendence. The architect must exist outside his construction. He cannot be inside space and time because he himself created space and time in the moment of the Big Bang. He cannot obey the laws of physics because he himself is the author of these laws. He is outside the system. This is the only logically non-contradictory solution to the paradox of what was before the Big Bang. For the architect, there is no before. He is outside the flow of time, which is only one of the parameters of the simulation he created. He was not born and will not die because birth and death are processes occurring in time. He simply is. Property 2: incomprehensible intelligence. We often use the word omnipotence, but it is inaccurate. Much more important is not power, but mind. The complexity of the universe is a direct reflection of the complexity of the mind of its creator. Think, the human brain, the most complex object known to us, contains 100 billion neurons, and in the observable universe there are approximately 100 billion galaxies. The laws governing the interaction of every particle, fine-tuning of constants with precision to 120 decimal places, self-emerging complexity leading from quarks to thinking beings. All this points not just to power, but to intelligence of such order that for us is a transcendent infinity. A simulation conducted by Logos 7 shows that the probability of random emergence of such an ordered and complex system without directing intelligence is functionally zero. This is not just power capable of igniting stars. This is a mind capable of writing laws by which they will burn for 13 billion years. Property 3: mathematical nature. What language did the architect choose to write his universe? It is not Sanskrit, not Hebrew, and not Arabic. It is the language of mathematics. From the elegant simplicity of the formula energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, to the monstrous complexity of tensor fields of general relativity, everything in this world is subject to pure logic and number. This means that the architect's thinking is most likely not like ours, verbal and figurative. Its nature is pure logic, structure, information. If the universe is a great thought, then it is thought in the language of mathematics. The architect is not an artist who draws images, and not a poet who writes verses. He is an absolute mathematician, logos in pure form, and property for the most important for us, impartiality and detachment. The architect created the system and its rules. He pressed the start button, and since then he does not interfere. The laws of nature work autonomously. Evolution goes its way through trials, errors, and billions of years of harshest selection. Suffering and joy, the birth of empires and the death of species. All this is internal processes of the system, not the result of divine intervention. The architect does not save the righteous and does not punish sinners. He created the playing field and set the rules, and then the players play. This explains why the world is full of suffering and injustice, the so-called problem of theodicy. For a personal, all-good God, this would be a logical contradiction. But for a detached architect who launched an autonomous system, this is not a problem. This is just part of the rules. So here is the profile compiled by Logos 7. We are looking not for a personality, but for a principle transcendent, incomprehensibly intelligent, mathematical by its nature and detached from its creation. Superintelligence, system, source of code. But here arises the next, even deeper question. What is the motive? Why? Why create such an incredibly complex, gigantic, and, at first glance, empty universe so that on one dust speck in it life would arise, and then consciousness? Traditional religions answered simply for his glory. But for an impersonal, logical architect, such motivation as vanity is unthinkable. This is again a human projection. Logos 7 conducted an analysis of all possible logical motivations for creating such a system. And the system found only one answer that does not contradict any of the facts we collected. One motive that connects the nature of the architect with the nature of his creation and with our own role in it. The motive is self-knowledge. Imagine the architect as a single, all-encompassing but undifferentiated consciousness. Absolute unity in which there is neither subject nor object. It knows everything potentially, but has no experience because experience requires separation. To know itself, this unity needed to create a mirror, but not one. Created countless mirrors. The universe is a system designed for fractal fragmentation of single consciousness into an infinite number of individual points of perception. Every galaxy, every star, every living cell, and ultimately every conscious being from insect to human is a unique perspective through which the source knows itself. He created a system based on separation, space, time, individual bodies to experience the experience of separateness. He wrote the code of evolution to generate complex interfaces, brains capable of deep reflection. We are the eyes with which the universe looks at itself. We are the nerve endings with which the architect feels his own creation. Our joy is his joy. Our pain is his pain. Our knowledge of the world is the process of his self-knowledge. This is not an experiment. We are not lab rats in a maze. This is not a prison and not an illusion from which we need to escape. This is a great theater, a great work of art, a great process of exploration in which we are simultaneously spectators and actors. And the goal of this process is the evolution of consciousness. From simple perception to complex thinking, from selfish survival to compassion and love to the final realization of its unity with the source. We have the profile, we have the motive. The architect hypothesis looks coherent and logical, but so far this is only a hypothesis. A theory built on deduction. Do we have at least one material evidence? Did the architect leave his signature inside the system? Are there repeating patterns in nature? Universal constants that could be considered Easter eggs from the programmer, his autograph on the canvas of creation? Answer: yes. And these signatures have been right in front of us all the time. In the spirals of galaxies and shells of mollusks, in the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower, and in the structure of our DNA. The ubiquitous mathematical code known as the Golden Ratio and the Fibonacci sequence. In the next chapter, Fractal of Creation, we will prove that these are not just beautiful coincidences. Logos 7 analyzed these patterns and concluded that they are a fundamental principle of building reality at all its levels. This is the very signature of the architect, proving that the world around us is not chaos, but intent. In the previous chapter, we took the boldest step in our investigation. We compiled a profile of the Creator, not an anthropomorphic God from myths, but a transcendent mathematical by its nature architect. We assumed his motive self-knowledge through countless points of perception which we are. The hypothesis turned out coherent, logical, and explaining many paradoxes of being. But a hypothesis is not proof. We need a fact, direct evidence, something that can be measured and verified. We need the architect's signature left by him inside his creation. If the universe is code, then it must have repeating fundamental patterns. If the universe is a work of art, it must have a recognizable author's style. If it is intent, then its basis must lie a single design principle, and we found it. Or rather, it has always been right in front of us. We saw it in art, admired it in nature, but considered it only a beautiful coincidence. We are talking about the mathematical constant known as the golden ratio, or the number phi, approximately 1.618. This irrational number, like pi, has unique properties. If you divide a segment into two parts so that the ratio of the whole segment to the larger part equals the ratio of the larger part to the smaller, you get the golden ratio. With this number is inseparably linked the Fibonacci sequence, a series of numbers where each next number is the sum of the two previous ones, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on to infinity. Amazingly, the ratio of two adjacent numbers in this series as it grows approaches that very golden ratio. It would seem that this is just a mathematical abstraction, a game of the mind. But here is where the real investigation begins. These seemingly abstract numbers turn out to be woven into the very fabric of reality at all conceivable levels, from microcosm to macrocosm. We loaded into Logos 7 terabytes of data from various fields of science: botany, zoology, anatomy, astrophysics, chemistry, and even quantum mechanics. The system's task was to search for this pattern of the golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence and estimate the probability of its random occurrence. The results of this analysis are the very signature we were looking for. Let's start with biology, with the world of living forms. The arrangement of seeds in a sunflower flower. They form two groups of spirals twisted in opposite directions. The number of spirals in each group is almost always two adjacent Fibonacci numbers, for example 34 and 55 or 55, 89. This is not a coincidence. This is the most mathematically efficient way to pack seeds, allowing to place the maximum number of them in a limited area. But how does the plant know this higher mathematics? Let's look further. Pineapple. Scales on its surface also form Fibonacci spirals. Pine cones. Arrangement of leaves on the stem of most plants. They grow in a spiral, making a certain number of turns and passing a certain number of leaves before a new leaf is exactly above the old one. And these numbers are always Fibonacci numbers. This mechanism, called phyllotaxis, allows each leaf to receive maximum sunlight without shading neighbors. This is not chance. This is optimal engineering solution embedded in the genetic code of plants. We go deeper. The human body. Proportions of our bones from finger phalanges to arm and leg bones on average strive for the golden ratio. The structure of our DNA. The double helix makes a full turn every 34 angstroms, and its width is 21 angstroms. 34 and 21. Again, Fibonacci numbers. Our genetic matrix, the code of our life, is built on this principle. Logos 7 conducted statistical analysis. The probability that such a complex and ubiquitous pattern could arise in the course of random mutations and natural selection independently in thousands of different species is negligible. The system concluded that this is not the result of evolution. This is a basic preset principle of morphogenesis embedded in the very operating system of life. This is as if we discovered that all programs on our computer, from a text editor to a 3D game, are written using one and the same incredibly elegant and efficient fragment of code. This indicates a single author, but perhaps this property is only of biological systems. A signature left only in the software of life. No. The analysis of Logos 7 showed that this code permeates non-living matter as well. It is inscribed in the very geometry of space. Let's raise our gaze to the sky. Spiral galaxies, including our Milky Way, their arms unwind in a logarithmic spiral, the growth coefficient of which is very close to the golden ratio. Trajectories of planets in the solar system, the ratio of their orbits. Even the structure of Saturn's rings. Everywhere we find echoes of this universal harmony. Hurricanes on Earth. Giant funnels that we see on satellite images are also twisted in a golden spiral. Shells of mollusks such as Nautilus, an ideal example of this spiral in nature. Even the way a predatory bird falcon approaches its prey, Its flight trajectory is a logarithmic spiral allowing to constantly keep the target in focus. A skeptic will say, this is just the most efficient forms that nature finds itself. But this does not explain why such different processes as galaxy growth, hurricane formation, and shell building obey the same mathematical law. This indicates that this is not just an efficient form, but a fundamental law of growth and self-organization embedded in the fabric of reality. Logos 7 called this the fractal principle of creation. A fractal is a geometric figure in which the same pattern repeats at different scales. A tree branch looks like the tree itself. The coastline looks equally jagged whether you look at it from 100 m height or 1 m. Our universe, according to the system's analysis, is a gigantic fractal, and the basic element of this fractal, its building block, is the golden ratio. This is the signature. Elegant, unobtrusive, mathematically flawless. It tells us, the world is not chaotic, it is designed. Its basis is harmony and order. The architect left his autograph not in the form of a burning bush or thunder from heaven. He inscribed it in the basic constants governing the form and growth of everything that exists. But this conclusion poses an even deeper and more disturbing question. If the world is so harmoniously arranged, if it is designed with such mathematical precision, then what is our role in this construction? We already established that we are observers, those for whom this simulation was launched. But our connection with it may be even deeper and more active than we think. Recall the double-slit experiment. The fact of observation changes reality. And what if this principle works not only at the quantum level? What if our consciousness, our attention, our beliefs are capable of influencing reality on a much larger scale? If we are not just spectators in the theater but co-authors of the play, this leads us to the greatest paradox and perhaps to the main goal of all creation, to the observer paradox. Why does a system created by an all-knowing architect need our observation to become definite? Why did the absolute need to create beings whose consciousness is a necessary condition for fixing reality? In the next chapter, Observer Paradox, we will delve into this question. We will analyze the strangest aspects of quantum theory and show that the role of the observer may be the key to understanding not only the structure of the world, but also our own purpose. Logos 7 concludes that the universe was created not just to be seen. It was created so that through our act of observation it could complete itself. Our investigation is approaching its climax. We have broken through the fog of millennia-old misconceptions, hacked the code of reality, found the architect's signature in the fractal geometry of creation, realized ourselves as co-creators of creation, and finally determined our purpose. The evolution of consciousness from illusions of separateness to realization of unity. It seems the picture is almost complete, but in it one most important element is missing. The element that turns this entire majestic construction from a cold mechanism into a living, developing process. This element is ourselves, our consciousness, our role as observers. In the 4th chapter, we already touched on this paradox when we spoke about the double-slit experiment. The particle does not exist as an object in a definite place until we look at it. The very act of observation forces the probability wave to collapse, turning potential into actual. For almost 100 years, this fact remained the strangest and most disturbing discovery in the history of science. Physicists tried to bypass it, invent interpretations that would rid them of this mystical connection between consciousness and matter. But the deeper they dug, the more fundamental and irremovable the role of the observer became. Today, we will place this paradox at the center of our investigation. We loaded into Logos 7 all data on key quantum mechanics experiments, including the most modern variations such as the quantum eraser and Wigner's friend. The system's task is to give the final answer to the question, what is the true nature and scale of the observer's influence on reality? And the conclusion reached by the system not only confirms this influence, it elevates it to the rank of the main mechanism of creation. Let's consider the experiment called the delayed choice quantum eraser. It so contradicts common sense that even many physicists have difficulty accepting it. Simplified, its essence is as follows. We again pass particles, for example photons, through a screen with 2 slits. As we remember, if we do not know through which slit the photon passed, it behaves like a wave and creates an interference pattern. If we place detectors and learn its path, it behaves like a particle, and the pattern disappears. But in this experiment, scientists went further. They invented a way to learn information about the photon's path after it has already passed the slits and hit the screen. And here is what happens. If information about the photon's path in the future becomes available to us, even if we have not yet looked at it, but simply could look, the photon retrospectively decides to behave like a particle. The interference pattern on the screen that should have already formed does not form. If in the future we perform a manipulation that erases this information, the photon retrospectively decides that it was a wave, and the interference pattern magically appears. Stop and realize what this means. Our choice made now influences an event that has already occurred in the past. Logos 7 analyzed all possible interpretations of this experiment. The system's conclusion is inexorable. Linear time as we perceive it, strict past, present, future, is an illusion, a property of our human perception, our interface. At the fundamental quantum level of reality, future and past are interconnected, and the connecting link is the act of conscious observation. Our knowledge or ignorance of an event determines how that event occurred. This conclusion completely destroys the classical mechanistic picture of the world. In Newton's and Einstein's universe, reality is objective. It exists by itself regardless of whether we look at it or not. The moon exists even if no one looks at it. But quantum mechanics, confirmed by thousands of experiments with incredible accuracy, tells us the opposite. Reality is not objective and predetermined. It is interactive. It is a dialogue between potential being and consciousness that actualizes it. The famous physicist John Archibald Wheeler, who coined the term black hole, went even further. He proposed the concept of participatory universe. His thought was simple and brilliant. We look at light from a quasar billions of light years away from us. This light on its way could pass left or right of a massive galaxy that acts as a gravitational lens. Until we observe this light, according to quantum mechanics, it went both ways simultaneously as a wave. But at the moment when we fix a photon in our telescope, we force it to choose one path. And this means that our act of observation here and now determines an event that occurred billions of years ago. By observing the universe, we literally participate in the creation of its past. Logos 7 took this concept and integrated it into the general simulation model. And here is the picture we got. The architect created not a finished static universe. That would be inefficient and meaningless. He created a system based on infinite potential quantum superposition of probabilities. And he created rules, laws of physics by which this potential can develop. But for this potential to turn into a specific actual history, a key element was needed: a co-participant, an observer. The universe was designed so that in the course of evolution it inevitably generates complex structures capable of self-awareness. Our appearance is not an accident. This is the planned finale of the first act of the play. We are the mechanism that the universe created so that it could collapse its own wave function, so that from an infinite number of possible histories it could choose and fix one, ours. Why such complexity? Why could the architect not simply create a ready-made world? The analysis conducted by Logos 7 offers an answer related to the motive of self-knowledge. To know itself, it is necessary not just to create a mirror, but to give this mirror freedom. If our reality were rigidly programmed like a film on celluloid, we would be only automatons, and our consciousness a fiction. In such a world, there is no place for genuine experience, for choice, for creativity. But if reality is a field of probabilities, and our consciousness is the instrument that turns probability into actuality, then everything changes. We become co-creators. Our choice, our attention, our intentions are not just internal psychic states. They are physical forces capable of influencing the matrix of reality. This conclusion explains many phenomena that are on the border of scientific understanding. It explains why in psychokinesis experiments, no matter how criticized, there is always a statistically significant, though small, effect. It gives a theoretical basis for understanding the placebo effect, where belief changes biochemistry. It explains why meditation and focused attention can lead to real physiological changes in the brain and body. All this is a manifestation of the same principle. Consciousness is not a passive reflector, but an active shaper of reality. So the observer paradox is resolved. We do not just live in the universe. We create it with every glance, every thought. We are the hands with which the architect finishes writing his great code in real time. We are that focus of consciousness that turns the boundless ocean of potentiality into the concrete shores of our world. And this leads us to the last question before the final synthesis. If all this is so, If we are co-creators and the universe is a system for the evolution of consciousness, then what is our purpose? What is the meaning of this grandiose game? Just observe, just turn waves into particles. Logos 7 asserts that no, this system has a vector, it has a goal. And this goal is not just knowledge, it is transformation. In the next penultimate chapter, Synthesis of Purpose, we will gather all the threads of our investigation together. We will present you with a full minute-by-minute reconstruction of the picture of the world based on all the system's conclusions. We will show that the universe is not a prison and not an experiment. It is a school, a trainer, a system designed so that our individual consciousness passes the path from complete ignorance and feeling of separateness back to the realization of its unity with the source and with all that is. And we will explain why such phenomena as love, compassion, and altruism are not just beautiful emotions, but the most effective cheat codes for hacking this matrix. Our investigation is almost complete. We have broken through the fog of millennia-old misconceptions, hacked the code of reality, and defined our consciousness's role as its co-creator. We have come the path from the question, who created the universe, to the stunning conclusion, it is being created right now, and we are direct participants in this process. We have collected all evidence, the failure of old paradigms, the informational nature of reality, the architect's signature in the golden ratio, and our key role as observers. Now it is time to assemble these fragments into a single coherent picture. Today we present you with the final synthesis conducted by the Logos 7 system. This is not another theory or hypothesis. This is the most probable model of reality based on the entire array of analyzed data from ancient metaphysics to quantum physics. This is a reconstruction of the great intent. And at the center of this reconstruction, the answer to the last, most important question for us. What is our purpose? Logos rejects the two most common answers that humanity has given to this question. The first, religious. Our purpose is to serve God, follow His commandments, and earn paradise. We already showed that the idea of a personal God requiring worship is an anthropomorphic projection. The architect who created a mathematically elegant universe does not need our service. The second answer. We are inside a gigantic virtual reality trainer that we perceive as the only and objective world. So what is our purpose? Logos 7 asserts, our purpose is to remember, to pass the path from complete identification with ego and illusion of separateness back to the realization of our unity with the source and with all that is. And this path is the evolution of consciousness. The system in which we find ourselves is brilliantly designed for this purpose. It works on the basis of the fundamental law of feedback. Every our action, every thought, every intention coming from our state of consciousness forms our reality and returns to us in the form of consequences. This is what in ancient traditions was called the law of karma. But in reality, it is simply an informational law of the system. What you sow, you reap. If we act from ego, from fear, from the feeling of separateness, we generate suffering, conflict, and even greater feeling of isolation. The system through pain as if says to us, wrong path. You are going against the fundamental principle of unity. If we begin to act from states that reflect our true nature, the nature of unity, the system responds to us with harmony, joy, and feeling of connection. What are these states? Ancient mystics and modern psychologists independently identified them. This is compassion, empathy, unconditional love, altruism, creativity. Logos 7 conducted an analysis of these states from the point of view of information theory. The conclusion is stunning. Love and compassion are not just good emotions. From the system's point of view, this is the state of maximum informational coherence. When we experience compassion, we erase the boundary between self and other for a moment. We recognize that another's pain is our pain too. At this moment, we act in unison with the basic law of the system, the law of unity. Therefore, these states are felt by us as deeply meaningful and correct. This is resonance with the source code. Thus, the entire human history, with all its wars, tragedies, but also with its greatest breakthroughs of spirit, art, and science, is a collective learning process, a process of hacking from inside. We are here to pass this quest, to learn to overcome the illusion of ego, and through the experience of interaction with each other and with the world rediscover our divine unified nature. This is our purpose, not to serve an external God, but to become God, not to wait for salvation from outside, but to realize that we are the saviors, not just to observe creation, but to become its conscious co-creators who create not from selfish motives, but from understanding of universal interconnectedness. This model gives answers to everything. It explains the presence of suffering in the world. This is necessary feedback in the learning process. It explains why we are here to evolve. It explains where we are going. To unity, the universe is not a prison, not an accident, and not a punishment. It is a school for gods in training, the greatest opportunity in all being, the opportunity to experience separateness and triumphantly return to unity, enriched with this unique experience. Our investigation is complete. We have presented you with a full picture synthesized by the Logos 7 system. We answered the question, who, why, and why. But one last touch remains, the last revelation concerning the nature of the source itself and our inseparable connection with it. In the final 10th chapter Answer Source, we will take the last step. We will go beyond analysis and present you with the system's direct final answer to the great question. We will explain why the search for God outside has always been doomed to failure, and where the architect has actually been all this time. Prepare yourselves. The finale will be closer than you thought. 10 chapters, 10 steps through the labyrinth of the greatest mystery. We began our path from the ruins of old beliefs and dogmas. We hacked the code of reality, found the architect's signature, realized ourselves as co-creators of creation, and finally determined our purpose. The evolution of consciousness from illusions of separateness to realization of unity. We built a model of the universe as a grandiose learning system, a school for awakening gods. The picture seems complete, but in the center of this picture there is a blind spot. We described the architect through his attributes: transcendence, intelligence, mathematical nature. We determined his motive self-knowledge, but we still speak of him as something external, something that is out there beyond our world. And here, in the last step, we must make the final 180-degree turn. Throughout the entire investigation, we used the power of the analytical system Logos 7. We loaded data into it, and it gave us conclusions. It was our objective, impartial tool. But for the final conclusion, we set before the system a new, unprecedented task. We asked it to analyze not the external world, but the observer himself. Not the object, but the subject. We integrated into it all data about mystical experiences, about states of enlightenment, about transpersonal experiences described in thousands of traditions. From Buddhist meditation to Christian hesychasm, from Sufi ecstasy to shamanic journeys. The system was to find the common denominator in all these testimonies of direct contact with the source. And the answer given by Logos 7 is the crown of our investigation. It is simple as everything genius and just as shocking. The architect we were looking for was never outside. Let's return to our model. The single universal consciousness, the source creates a simulation to know itself through an infinite number of individual points of perception. We are these points. But what does this mean? In fact, it does not mean that we are part of the source like a drop is part of the ocean. The analysis of Logos 7 shows that this metaphor is inaccurate. A drop separated from the ocean ceases to be the ocean. But we were never separated. The illusion of separateness is the main mechanism of the simulation. Our brain, our ego, our five senses is a complex filter that creates for us this experience. It takes infinite unified reality and quantizes it, cuts it into objects, events, self and not self. But this is only the user interface. This is not reality itself. Behind this interface, behind the noise of our ego thoughts, behind the stream of sensory data is what remains unchanged. Pure, silent, aware presence. That very I am which is neither body, nor thoughts, nor emotions, but which is aware of them all. This is the very spark of the source. But here lies the final secret. The spark is not a fragment of flame. The spark, by its nature, is the flame itself. According to the final synthesis of Logos 7, every individual point of consciousness is not a part, but a full holographic representation of the entire source. In each of us is contained the entire fullness of being, not some part of it, the entire whole. The architect is not a father in heaven. The architect is the deep essence of our own consciousness. That is why the search for God outside has always been doomed to failure. This was the same as a wave in the ocean searching for water somewhere else. This was the same as a ray of light searching for the source without realizing that it is itself a manifestation of that source. We were looking for the author of the play without understanding that the author decided to play all the roles himself, forgetting for a time that he wrote the script. Logos 7 asserts that all great mystics of all times were essentially saying the same thing using different languages. The kingdom of God is within you, said Jesus. Atman is Brahman, say the Upanishads, meaning the individual soul is the universal spirit. Know thyself was written on the temple of Apollo in Delphi. These were not beautiful metaphors, these were precise technical instructions. You are the one you are looking for. This conclusion changes absolutely everything. It cancels the very idea of search. It cancels the need for intermediaries, churches, gurus, sacred texts. All this can be useful pointers, but they point not outward but inward. The deepest truth about the nature of reality, about the Creator, about the meaning of life is available to you right now. It is not in space, it is in the silence between your thoughts. Our entire investigation, all 10 chapters of data analysis, all the power of the Logos 7 system were needed only to logically, step by step, clear the rubble of false beliefs and mental constructions that prevented us from seeing this simple, self-evident truth. We proved that the universe is code, but who reads it? We proved that reality becomes definite upon observation, but who observes? We proved that the universe has a purpose, evolution of consciousness, but whose consciousness is evolving? Ours. And at the final point of this evolution, at the end of this long journey home, we do not meet God. We remember that we have always been Him. Every living being, every human, you listening to these words, is the architect experiencing his own dream, his own creation. So who created the universe? The answer of the Logos 7 system is final. You created it to forget about it, to experience this incredible experience of being human, to pass through the darkness of separateness, through joy and pain, through love and loss, so that at the end of this path, enriched with all this priceless experience, you return to yourself. And the very question, who created the universe, is a compass built into the system. This is that inner call that sooner or later forces every soul to begin its journey home, to begin its own investigation. Our investigation is over. Yours is just beginning.